Hi, Audrey.
Hey,
Hey,
I
Lizette.
can't believe I'm here early.
Audrey, I tried to promote you as a panelist. If you can hear me. Okay. Can you hear me okay, Audrey? It just sounds low. I think it's on my end. Hold on.
Let me turn up my volume
Oh,
here.
yeah. Whatever you did sounded better.
Does this sound better?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good. How are you doing? Oh, we're just waiting for the rest of the committee members to come in. The chairperson should be here soon.
Sounds good.
Hi, Tanisha.
Significant, we really need to uncover how they're doing that, and we're
How are
not
you?
getting that sensitivity just yet. So we want to think about how we're adjusting that for spring, and are interested to hear ideas. On the next slide, we
Running
do
the meeting
see an
tonight, Jack?
anonymized comparison
We
district
hear
by
your
district. There
meeting.
is some differentiation here.
You running the meeting tonight?
No, I had a meeting in the morning at the time that we're doing it.
Oh, okay. What's in the background? What's that noise?
What do you hear?
Sound like a fan.
You can hear that?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think it's the building's AC.
Mm-hmm. Can hear it.
We barely hear it.
Is it still too loud? Trying to lower the mic. Hey, how you doing?
Are we gonna get this one?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry to be a little late. Give me 1 second. We're about to start. All right, folks. Hello. Welcome to the Housing and Human Services Community Board 12 meeting. Again, I'm so sorry to get started late. Today is December 4th, 2025, and I am so excited to announce that we will have a presentation today from the Department of City Planning. And before we get started, would just love to do a quick round of introductions. And we can start with those in the room, and then we'll go on to those who are on Zoom. So hello, I'm Indiana Porta, and I am this committee's chair, and I will pass it along.
Hey everyone, I'm Jay Bias. I'm the Vice Chair of Housing and Human Services, and I'll pass it over.
Hi, I'm Stefan De Jesus. I'm a CB12 member and happy to be here. Good evening.
Hi all, I'm Lisette Severus. This is my first year in housing, and I'm happy to be here.
Great, thank you. We'll move to some folks online.
Radia, you want to go after?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Radia Barnes. I am a member of this wonderful committee as well as the Business Development Committee, and I am a lifelong Washington Heights resident.
And then Marshall.
Yes, good evening. I'm Marshall Vanderpool. I'm a public member of the Housing and Human Services Committee, and I believe I may have to leave early, so I'll stop right here and thank you.
Thank you.
And then Tanisha, if you're there. Just trying.
She may have stepped away, yeah, no problem. All right, so folks, I just wanted to give you a quick update. We don't have any elected representatives online or here with us. We don't have any community-based organizations tonight, and we also, I don't think, have quorum, but the good news is that we're not voting on anything. So, I think that we should be fine to advance. So I think I've got a couple of very short updates about some of the questions that we had talked about at our last meeting related to, can we get an email address for our committee? Can we, talking about maybe ways that we can post some information on social media. But I think let's save that towards the end. I would love to give the floor to Audrey and have her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her role. And she's here representing the New York City Department of City Planning. So just to give us a sense of what her agency does and, a little bit of an overview at first. And then she's also happy to answer questions. She let us know. So I will give the floor to Audrey. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you so much, Indiana, for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me present at your committee today. I have maybe a 15-minute presentation prepared, but it's pretty casual in nature, and we'll just go through, as you said, some of the work that we do and some of the resources that might be helpful for your committee. Can I start a screen share?
Yeah, you should be able to. Let me know if you can.
I think I can.
Is the projector working?
Not. We can turn this one around.
Okay.
All right, give us 1 second. We're just
no
going to
worries.
turn on the screen. And Lisette, we may need you to come here if we can't get the screen on. loading up. Thank you. All right, we're loading.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, just 1 minute. Maybe, Audrey, if you don't mind, give us 2 minutes while we
Yeah,
get
no worries.
the screen up.
Yeah, take your
And
time.
just to be like mindful of folks' time, maybe I can give the couple of updates because they're relatively brief. So we had identified some questions at the last meeting of how can we better engage the community. And I'll start with like the social media piece. For right now, we are holding off on the social media because the board leadership is trying to get clarity on like who has the authority to post. Like most likely we can, what we kind of talked about in the executive meeting was like maybe we can propose and prepare social media postings, and then it would likely need to go through the community board staff to actually post, which, you know, certainly makes sense, right? So I think that given some of the feedback that we got from our community member that attended, some like very basic 101 information would be good. And I think that one of the issues that came up in the executive committee was that sometimes the community thinks that the community board has more authority than we actually do. So kind of starting out, giving some like perspective that like the community board kind of serves almost like a telephone function, right? Where we can relay the concerns of the community to some of the government agencies that we partner with and some of the elected officials. So I think maybe if like anybody wants to and has ideas of like social media postings or, you know, maybe like 2 or 3 line descriptions, we welcome them, right? I don't know exactly when we're like having some transition right now with board staff. So it likely wouldn't happen, you know, in this month. It would likely be like in the new year. And I think that that's something that we can maybe start to hash out over our, you know, email threads and in future meetings, coming up with some of that content. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so we've got our presentation up. Let me just, for a clean, you know, editing. We're cleaning up our sound. And let me just start over with our introduction, just so that if we ever need to crop this, we've got a full introduction. So
Sure thing.
tonight, December 4th, 2025, the Housing and Human Services Committee for CV12 is really excited to have the Department of City Planning here to present to us an overview about what they do and ways that our committee can work, you know, with the agency and just give us a sense of what they do. So I will let Audrey introduce herself more fully. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Audrey Walks. I'm a borough planner at DCP, and I work mostly with community boards 9 and 12 in Upper Manhattan. So just to run through our agenda for the night, I'm going to do a quick history of zoning, do an overview of Department of City Planning, our mission, goals, and work.
Wait, hold on, because I think that Indiana, can you mute? the air conditioner or whatever in the back. Oh my goodness.
I
It's
mean, there's a
So-
lot of
so loud.
cross divisionally that have been able to happen because of this work.
There we go.
I tried Lauren.
So I had this issue when I joined the land use meeting yesterday, and we couldn't figure out what it was that was causing the issue.
I mean, I can.
Was it in this room?
Audrey, do you also hear?
Yeah, I do. It's
All
pretty faint for me, but I do hear it.
Let me just tell me if you guys hear after I do something. Can you hear it now?
That's much
That's better.
That's
better.
way better.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry.
No worries. So yeah, so just to pick up, I'm going to do a quick overview of what Department of City Planning does. An overview of what the Manhattan office does, and a quick run through or like a peek behind the hood at what we do to move applications from idea to completion. And then finally, we'll wrap with some tools and resources that are stewarded by the DCP that could be useful for your committee. So let's get started. So the main tool in our agency toolbox is zoning. Zoning tells you where you can build, the shape and size of your building, which is also called bulk or massing, and how you can use that building. So why do we need zoning? The answer is that zoning is in New York City is in a large part a response to rapid population and industrial growth in the 1800s and into the early 1900s, which created very overcrowded living conditions, lots of pollution, and negative social impacts resulting from that. These factors were paired with buildings that had inadequate light, air, and open space, and there were few to no rules for what uses were permitted and where. And all of this led to a public health crisis and pressure from the public, and early social reformers established regulations in tenement buildings for basic minimum requirements of building. When tenement laws were in place, reformers could turn towards addressing concerns about bulk and land use. And so in 1916, New York City answered the call for unified bulk regulations by creating the first comprehensive zoning resolution in the country. This resolution protected access to light and air, separated industrial and residential uses by very basic use districts, height districts, and area districts, depending, the 1916 one depended largely on the width of the street. So zoning has always been very intimately connected to housing reform, housing design, and housing struggles. So that basic zoning framework, even though it's over 100 years old, it still stands. But over time, the city has had to enact zoning changes in response to new development and planning challenges. So let's say I own a property or I'm a developer and I want to build something. In New York, development follows a few different paths. The most common is in that blue box, as of right, which means that it follows all the rules in zoning and the building code. And this is how most development happens, which makes up 80 to 90% of all new housing in New York. And then on the right, if a development doesn't meet all the zoning rules, it might need approvals from the Board of Standards and Appeals, which give these permissions called variances, or it might need to go through the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, commonly known as ULURP. And this is where DCP comes in. So Department of City Planning's mission is to plan for the future of New York, working to create thriving and dynamic neighborhoods with access to housing and jobs, resilient infrastructure, and a vibrant public realm. DCP promotes housing production and affordability, fosters economic development and coordinated investments in infrastructure and services, supports resilient, sustainable communities across the 5 boroughs for a more equitable New York City. We also contribute to the preparation of the city's 10-year capital strategy, work on ground-up planning with communities, and develop land use policies and zoning regulations. We create and manage data relating to housing, transportation, community facilities, population, zoning, urban design, waterfront areas, and more for use by other agencies and the public at large. In addition to these tasks, the DCP supports the City Planning Commission in the review of around 450 land use applications annually. So I'm in the Manhattan office, one of 5 borough offices in the department. There's a team of planners for each geography in the borough, as well as urban designers and other staff. So the vision for Manhattan planning for our borough office reflects both the agency's mission and things that are particular to the borough. So our goals are to reinforce Manhattan as the region's economic engine, promote equitable growth and add housing, especially affordable housing in high opportunity areas, leverage projects and interagency efforts to improve infrastructure in the public realm, instill design excellence and resiliency strategies in civic buildings and public places, and continue to build relationships with communities and foster informed public discourse on land use and housing issues. So now we're going to dive behind the curtain here for the next 4 slides. This is going to be a bit of an info dump, but I just want to I'm going to do a high level skim of this, and just to give you an idea of, sitting at my desk right now, this is what I'm working on. This is what, my colleagues are working on and other DCP divisions do, day in and day out. So essentially, this is what's called the pre-certification process. So a developer or, an owner comes to us and says, hey, I have this idea for my property and I think what I want to do I would need, I would need to get an exception to the zoning rules, or I need to change them. So we go through a whole process with them, a whole dialogue. We have meetings with the applicant, with our specialized teams in technical review, environmental review, urban design. We determine what the exact course of action is that they need to take, giving them applicants guidance on zoning and land use rules, application requirements, how to outreach stakeholders, including the community boards and other local groups. And we go back and forth on this quite a bit which is that looping circle icon on the right-hand side. And then once we finalize everything, the applicant submits a draft land use application. We review the draft. They submit a filed one. And sometimes I've worked on applications where they need to submit 4 or 5 filed ones. So we kind of go through that revision loop each time. So, but important for our purposes today is that once the application is filed, it's posted publicly online. And once it's reviewed by DCP, when we get to the end of this arrow here, where it says headquarters and then review session, it goes to this review session, which is a bi-weekly meeting where the City Planning Commission certifies applications as complete so they can move on to public review. And DCP, I will flag that we do not approve or disapprove applications. Our job is to determine that an application is complete and ready for public review when all of the required materials and submissions meet DCP standards. So what makes a completed application? You might be curious, when does it meet our standards? This really varies by application. There's some examples on the right, but generally complete applications are clear, concise, and accurate and all the pre-certification steps and paperwork have been completed. The land use application provides the public and decision makers, like community boards and other stakeholders, with the information they need to assess the appropriateness of the requested zoning or land use action. So once the City Planning Commission certifies that application is complete, the ULURP clock starts, and you'll see that on the left-hand side of the screen. It goes from that certification to public review. And that public review starts with community boards and ends with the mayor's approval. This process will change some of these timelines, but this is sort of the textbook standard. The city charter revisions will change some of the timelines for some ULURP applications, but not all. And this is kind of like the textbook example of, we go from community board to borough president to city planning commission, and, most applications will continue to follow that standard. So we're done with the info dump. Now moving on to the final portion, which is finding information about land use application materials and other materials available on our website. So has anyone used the zoning application portal before? Does this look familiar? Not familiar? Not familiar. Okay, great. I'm so glad we get to talk about it today. This is where you can go and see, when I mentioned those applications that are filed. You want to see what's going on in my neighborhood, what is in public review, what has been completed. And you can filter, this is hyperlinked, and I'll send the presentation out, to the committee after this meeting. But essentially, you click this, you can filter by geography, by type of application, by borough, or by individual parcel. So let's say you click on this first one, which is Malcolm Shabazz Harlem Plaza, which is a project that my coworker worked on recently. You can click on that, and if you go to this drop-down menu, you can see all of the documents in the filed land use application. And this is a really great resource for learning about, for having all of that information that that one would need to know about, a particular application or action. And yeah, so in addition to that ZAP portal search, which is this second this second icon here, we also have tools like Zola, which shows you all the zoning districts and gives you information on every single parcel in New York City, ownership, size, what's built there. Community district profiles, which I know the land use committee contributes. They're in touch with DCP to talk about like their community district needs assessments. Those are all posted there. We have something called the Population Fact Finder. We can learn about census data that's linked to your neighborhood. A regional data explorer, and of interest to the committee, and probably most relevant. There's a Housing Development Explorer, which is tied to the Department of Buildings. You can see new buildings, alterations, demolitions. There's one for affordable housing production that looks at HPD, HPD-led or HPD, like mixed market rate and affordable buildings. One for NYCHA, a displacement risk map, which is uses data from many categories to estimate an area's risk of displacement relative to residential displacement, relative to other areas in the city. And then finally, just links to our zoning resolution, which is a very 1,000-page long block of text with all the ins and outs of everything you ever want to know about zoning. It's our zoning code. And then the CPC calendar. Lots of times, I know land use committee folks like coming, following the CPC calendar, seeing, the presentation. So all that information is there for public testimonies, things like that. And then finally, if you've seen an application that went through ULURP and you're curious about the reports or the research that went into it. There is a report search for that myself and other folks in my position prepare for each project that goes through Euler. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much. I will open up the floor to committee members and those online. I see a question online, so maybe we can start with that if it has to do with the presentation. Okay. All right, it looks like that was just about sound. So does anybody here or online have any questions?
Yeah, if I could, and thank you so much, Audrey, for sticking around this evening to work and give us an overview. I was wondering if you could just reiterate, how it is that DCP promotes housing and how that differentiates from the work of like HPD or the Department of Buildings.
That's a great question. So our main tool in our toolbox is zoning. And so zoning can make it very difficult to build housing, and it can also be written to encourage or incentivize housing, or make it possible to develop housing in areas where that wasn't a possibility. And so I think most recently, the City of Yes for housing opportunity zoning reforms, which is it passed city council it's enacted last year, actually almost a year to the day from now. And that really, that package of zoning reforms, was done in acknowledgement and response to a severe housing crisis and affordable housing crisis, and an acknowledgement that some areas are building a lot of housing, others are not, and trying to distribute that more equitably. And then to the second part of your question, Department of Buildings is, they are looking at, architects submit plans to them, for new development or an alteration. They're inspecting the boiler. They're, making sure that like the physical building itself is meeting building code and rules and requirements. And then HPD is kind of a hybrid organization in that they do, they do enforcement for, if your landlord's not repairing, repairing a leak, or, they're not responding to a rodent infestation, they send inspectors out in the same way a buildings department would, for their interests. But then they also do affordable housing financing. So they coordinate like loan packages for affordable housing developments. And then they also act as the applicant they have a planning and pre-development division that, they are the lead applicant, or they'll partner with the developer to build affordable housing. So I guess in Wood, one example of that would be like the Eliza at the Inwood Public Library. That was an HPD project. So sorry for the long response. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it absolutely did. Thank you.
I have a little bit of a follow-up. Or did you have a question?
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for being here and for your presentation. The proposals that just passed, does that affect the timeline, like your timeline? I see that from beginning to end, you said it would take like plus 200 days, let's say.
Yeah.
Was that shortened because of this proposal that just passed, or has that been impacted at all?
So I will be completely honest with you, which is this presentation is coming at like the best time and also the worst time, because the charter, we actually tomorrow, our agency staff is getting a briefing on how the charter revisions will affect every type of application we work on, and the timelines and what the timeline for implementation is. So we're kind of at that point where I can say this is like the canonical, this is, ULURP as most people know it, but then it will change for certain types of projects. I would love to speak on it, but I don't want to give the wrong information before this briefing. But I can certainly follow up with the community.
Thank you.
We would appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course, yeah.
One question that I had, and I'm sorry, like it's so basic, but I would like to use an example. I've been hearing a lot about the, I think the Elizabeth Street Garden, and how there was a push, or there was a plan for that to become affordable housing. And then, folks organized in the community and they wanted to preserve the garden, and there's been some back and forth there. Does DCP play a role in that based on how the property is zoned? Was there a zoning component to that, or was that just about the decision of where to place affordable housing? Like, I'm not sure. I imagine that's city-owned land, right? And I just wasn't sure, like, does your agency play a role in that? And if so, what? Or was that all related to HPD and the mayor's discretion on where to build affordable housing?
Yeah, I think I wish my downtown borough planner colleague just left.
And that's just, and I'm just using it as an example, so feel free to.
So I think that site was, so I don't quote me on this, but so a few years ago, the Department of City Planning, one of the things we do is lead neighborhood plans, and that can be looking at, in this case, it was a neighborhood plan for Soho and NoHo that led to a rezoning because those were neighborhoods with a lot of outdated like manufacturing districts that prevented residential from being built. And then there are also neighborhoods where they are not doing their fair share to provide housing, especially given how dense that area of Manhattan is. So the goal, so I believe, and let me double check this, I think that the Elizabeth Street Garden was one of the sites selected that could potentially be developed as affordable housing. It's my understanding that there is an ownership issue with the site. I'm just speculating or trying to remember, but it's privately owned. And then, but I think in a broader sense, this was probably a site that, it was identified for housing and, entered complications. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, let me double, I don't want to give wrong information, but that's my broad understanding. I'll get back to you on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think the reason I bring it up is because I'm new to chairing this committee, and we've got new members joining, and so many things are changing. And I think one of the big things that we talked about in an earlier meeting was that it's unclear, like it's one thing when a developer comes to you and you go through the process that you explained and there's ULURP and all of that, but it's unclear, like, what can our committee do proactively? So you answered one of those questions, something that came up were like properties that seem to be empty and we don't know who owns them and who to approach about that. So it seems like some of the portals that you flagged for us are going to be super helpful in that regard, right? Like I don't have the address off the top of my head, but there's like a property that we spent a lot of time talking about. So even just the things that you flagged for us today, I'm super, super grateful. And I think we're just trying to identify ways that we can plug in, maybe to take affirmative steps, whether identifying properties or the other thing that came up a lot was, what can our committee do after a project has been approved? For example, to make sure that the developer is maintaining their end of the whatever concessions they agreed to give or whatever deal we ended up with, like to make sure that there's accountability, or any ideas that you have for ways that our committee can be involved.
Well, I think, yeah, information is definitely the best resource, and I will the building new building explorer I think will definitely be a help because you can see, you know, DCP will come, for example, to the land use committee to say, hey, you know, this project's going through ULURP. The developer, we're going to sit here while the developer does a presentation, and you know, we can answer questions about ULURP, right? But that's, you know, is very, compared to the number of as of right developments, those are very few, you know, the ones where we are coming to the community board. So I think, yeah, just having that wider range of options through, you know, through the building department filings will kind of help, you know, keep tabs on things. I think, have you spoken with Community Board 9's Housing and Land Use and Zoning Committee?
So
Okay.
I recently met with somebody on the board, and she's going to connect us with Community Board 9.
Oh, great. Okay.
Because I worked out yet, but soon.
Great. They are extremely proactive about finding out about new developments. I am curious. I think you could. I would be curious what they would have to say and what tools they're using. Because they'll bring things to our attention that we were not aware of, you know, as of right, things that you know, they have questions about. So but there was more to your question. I feel like
No, I mean, it's great. I think the general question is like, in what ways can the public or our committee engage with you? I know that we've got our land use committee, and there's lots of expertise and experience there. I also attend those meetings. But just trying to get a sense of like, how can we plug into the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
And, you know, and how can our community engage more deeply, I guess, with DCP?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that and I was actually curious to hear this from you. Is there some type, like, is there a rule about which committees can interact with which agencies, or, you know, because I guess what I'm thinking of is when we have, you know, when we reach that point in the ULURP where we go before the community board, you know, it's generally to the land use committee and certain, you know, sometimes to the full board. So do you know if there's any, like, I'm genuinely don't know if there's rules about, you know, about engagement or anything like that.
There's no rules. Every board can make up their own rules, right? There's like there's chairs who don't like it if you reach out to their agency, you know, like,
yeah,
it's all based on personality.
Okay, got it.
So there's no actual guideline or policy that says you can't reach out to any agency. Like we may have housing and social services where we can reach out to any agency we want if we have questions related to something of interest.
Okay, that's actually great to know. And I think, you know, we like at DCP, you know, we really are very curious about, you know, about what's going on in the neighborhood, and land use and zoning. You know, that committee is fabulous, and I enjoy going to their meetings, and you know, and they're very well informed, but that's only one part of the picture. And so we would love to, you know, keep lines of communication open. So if there are, you know, if you have questions or issues or something that we can address or point resources towards, that would be great. And in turn, you know, they're definitely like boots on the ground questions that we would love to, you know, consult, you know, and get your expertise on.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
If there's no more, I'm gonna
go for it. Go
I'm
for
gonna
it.
test you out. I'm gonna start with sort of what your role is in relation to community boards. Do you sort of, you know, I know your mission is to like promote growth and issues like that. You also publish the community needs statement. but do you guys review that for accuracy or anything like that when it comes to your agency?
We have a group called planning support that coordinates with the community board statement of needs. For as far as accuracy, I don't know. I certainly read them because it's extremely helpful to know what top concerns are, and how the board and different committees are thinking like individually and holistically about issues. But it's my understanding that the community, like, can you actually explain the process from the community board side to me, if you don't mind, just like a quick, because we just get the report.
So it's a yearly process where we're going through sort of what we decide as budget priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how they gather, I'm assuming your folks are the one that help with the census data and information like that. But on our side, we sort of talk about operational and capital needs when it comes to community needs. And we have, every year we go through this process of ranking out sort of what our priorities are by committee. And they changed it this year. This year we don't have to rank them. Now we can just list what we think are important.
Amazing.
So they don't limit it. So it's like every committee comes up with their own things, then it goes to the full board. This year, same process sort of occurred, except we didn't have to rank it, so we didn't have to have a whole meeting about what's important, which was great. But from our understanding, I guess on timeline for you guys to publish, what does, two things, because you said there's like a group within you folks that help the community boards. And I was wondering if you can get us more information on what type of assistance what that assistance looks like what's available. That's why I was asking, like, what kind of input do you have in sort of our community needs? Because there's this, it's not, I think you guys may get, I don't know that you get like a budget request per se, but every agency, every time we list something, we want more affordable housing, it would go to the respective agency, it goes, and then at some point, after we submit our list, like a whole year after, or like the next year, at some point we get like responses to that. I'm still not clear on the timeline for that, internally versus externally.
Yeah.
But that's the way we're currently seeing it from our perspective.
So actually, that's super helpful to know. Let me find out. That's a really great question.
And so I know you were talking earlier about City of Yes and sort of that changes a lot of things on zoning, and I'm assuming DCP was a big part of promoting the zoning changes, or at least weighing in on how it should be crafted. Based on the law that passed, and there's like, it's based on certain neighborhoods that are not building enough, there's a certain criteria. Is that, at what point do you guys have insight to that? Like, do you currently have insight which zones it applies to now that it's already enacted and we're a year in?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with because it was a zoning, what's called a zoning text amendment. So we made changes to the actual, the rule book. And the idea, and so that originated with DCP, and was sort of developed, to the best of my knowledge, like in-house, by our housing division and other divisions. So the goal, or sort of the guiding ideal, was to build a little bit more housing everywhere. And so one of the things you got from that was universal affordability preference, which allows you know, a 20% bump in the size of the building if that extra, you know, 20% is affordable or income restricted housing. You also had the opportunity, or it created these higher density zoning districts like R11 and R12, which were mapped for the first time in Midtown, like around Penn Station, which, you know, in a thinking both borough and citywide, was an area that we identified as a quote unquote high opportunity area because so transit dense there. You know, but there's, I think, there's not as many people living in that area as you would think, and the area could support more. So some of those zoning districts help create those conditions. There's way more regulations, you know, that also apply to, you know, low density districts, like in, you know, in the outer boroughs. But those are just some of the, you know, regulations that would promote more housing in those lower density areas. Does that answer your question?
A little bit. Well, the reason I ask is because the way I saw the language, I mean, I wasn't very supportive of some of the change,
Yeah.
overall changes. Some were great, right? Like I believe in the mission of building housing everywhere, right? And not this, you know, where certain neighborhoods get to decide I don't want a taller building next to me. But the way I saw it when it was being proposed was if you're building, so basically if you're not building enough, the incentive was to change the laws to be able to build in those areas, which that was his goal. But then for me, it was sort of like the long-term view of it, of because right now we built a lot of housing in Community Board 12. I wouldn't say it's affordable. I mean, very few have been affordable. And we do these, you know, like, I don't know if you guys have a role in this, but when we're talking about growth in like more buildings and housing, to me, 1-bedrooms and studios shouldn't even exist at this point. No one's looking for that. The only people that look for that are college students or people that want to move to the city from another state or another location. That's the majority of the folks that don't mind those. But there's people who have families that keep growing that can't live here, and that's the majority of folks that move out. And so if we've already built a lot of housing, that means I don't see any sort of like growth in our area being forced, because now the focus is going to be in the areas that we're not building. And then when those folks are considered, you know, what is that threshold of when does that other community reach the threshold saying now they built more than this area, so now we have to go back here? You know what I'm saying? Like that's the way I saw it. I'm like, you're promoting housing in places that there is no housing, but then does that mean there's stagnation in the neighborhoods that we're building, even though it's still needed?
If someone had a definitive answer that they could convince everyone was the right answer to that, they would win a Nobel Prize in economics. It's such a hotly contested issue, you know, what is causing the housing, you know, the housing crisis. Is it a supply side crisis? Is it a demand side problem? And certainly there's equity considerations in, you know, in every conception of this problem. And I will say that the zoning, you know, as it's written is, treats it like a supply side problem, and so creates more or conditions for more housing. And yeah, and so this is a larger conversation, and certainly I think, you know, the charter revisions, there was, and again, don't want to talk on something that I haven't been briefed on, but just, learning about it as a voter, right? They're using a certain metric to figure out which community districts are building the most housing and the least housing, and then targeting the least housing. They'll have to, there's these certain developments that the council person, for example, might not necessarily be able to, say no to it. So that's one of the equity consider, one of the ways that it's being addressed. But yeah.
And it doesn't have to be affordable housing, right? Like they're just going to be looking at housing development at any price point.
That is a great question. I think, let me get back to you on that, because I know there was one focused on affordable housing and one that was focused on a modest, or what they're calling modest infrastructure and development projects, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's, so there is what Audrey was saying, where like, if you want to build up and some
extra,
existing
yeah.
housing, that has to have that sort of universal affordability.
And,
But from my understanding, it's open to any program that currently exists, which, at my age, who can argue that these are affordable? And, we have plenty of examples here where we have folks who have built based on those programs, and then you have the housing lottery percentage, and then the market rate ones, right in the same building, where it's $3,700 for a studio and close to $5,000 for a 2-bedroom. Who's paying for that, right? We've had a developer here propose, like from one of the developments on Broadway, that literally I was like, who are you attracting with that? Because it's not the people that live here.
Yeah. This is a great HPD. I wish that I knew more about the financing, because affordable housing is just a personal, and professional passion of mine. They would be able to better speak to the financing and how, the rents are set and things like that.
Yeah. And
So
I think Liza had that question.
Certainly did reach out to HPD and invited them to come. They seem to have their hands full right now, and also said that they didn't really have kind of like a 101 presentation, and they weren't sure if they could do things in the evening. So I will just take this opportunity again to really thank you. And I know that you were at land use yesterday. But if you have a contact, maybe.
I actually have a personal contact in the commissioner's office.
Okay,
so
great.
We can connect after and I can.
Perfect, thank you, yeah. Because I did reach out at the same time to HPD, but it just seems like they were less ready to come and chat with us. So, any recommendations, we'll love to have them.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that they're going through, they're doing some restaffing right now, so that it could just be a capacity thing. And then also, part of my job, requirements so that we go out and our community liaisons, other, people who are doing similar work might not have that requirement. And so then it becomes like can be a balancing act. Yeah.
Maybe that can be an action point for us, is to make sure that they fund that. Go ahead, Lisa.
Quick question for you, Audrey. Do you know the numbers as far as the density in different community boards? Like, I was looking at the census, and I believe we were at 68,000 per square mile.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, let's say, the projects that will get funded or approved or expedited, let's say, I'm not sure if you have anything to do, so I'm sorry if maybe you're not the right one for this question. But let's say, do you know how we fare as far as density as Community Board 12 compared to, let's say, 9 or 1, or would you know if we have a higher?
Oh, that's a great question. This would be something I think would be available on the.
It is.
Let's pull this up.
It's available in the community profiles. If you go to but you have to go to every.
Oh, we go through everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I'm curious. I would love to know.
And I guess one of the questions, because I mean, you just hinted that you don't really do much of the financing, which I understand, but you know, if your mission is to grow housing, it doesn't matter what it is, right? For you guys as an agency, it's just as long as you're zoning for growth.
Could you say more about that?
Like, you have no control over the financing, so you don't decide what's, like, if you zone for residential, you're just zoning for residential. You're not deciding whether it should be required to have parking in the building. You know, it baffles me that in a city where everyone who wants to have a car can't have one because we don't build the way other countries build, right? Like, you go to other countries, they either build on top or below for parking. And so I was wondering if you had any sort of role when it comes to like the housing that is built.
Yeah. I will say for something like, for something like parking, there is generally, parking used to be required in a lot of areas. Now some of those requirements have been lifted. And developments can choose, if there's a market for it, they can choose to provide parking, but they are now in many areas, and I have to check the geography. I'm not 100%. In many areas, they're not required to provide parking. Building on top, building below, to my understanding, there's, some logistical and engineering, issues given like Manhattan's, the bedrock and things like that, but also cost. It's incredibly expensive to build in New York. And so, when we're doing, when we're formulating these zonings, it's based on, consideration of economic data, economic trends, physical built environment, flood resilience, transportation access, future transportation access, like Second Avenue subway. So it's and that's, that's how they're deciding, whether we put concentrate or encourage residential here and have manufacturing here, things like that.
And I'll give you an example after this question. When you say that the cost, like, to build parking under, and it's not a flood zone. Let's just start there. And I guess the trouble I have with that comment is that the developer, the person who has chosen to buy this property and develop there, had every opportunity to check out the property. And they chose to buy that property, and yet they don't want to build the parking even though it's zoned for it. And the argument would be cost. But, as someone who can't buy an apartment, but I have to rent, because that's what's the majority available and affordable for folks, I can't just one day choose not to pay rent.
Right.
Because I'm not satisfied with the space. And this comes to my next question on the Board of Standards and Appeals, which I hate, by the way.
You're not the only.
Their literal role is to waive zoning laws. What role do you play with them? And like, do you ever coordinate with them? Do you speak to them? Do you advise them?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this in a specific way, which I'll just tell you about my experience with them. So we're informed when there's a VSA application that's happening in, Ward 9, 12, and we usually get a notice about it. And it just says, there'll be a hearing on X, Y, and Z. And then, but we don't have, or at least let me put it this way. To the best of my knowledge right now, and in my capacity as a borough planner, that we're not, going to the BSA and talking to them or advocating for, we're not advocating for anything. But there are some applications where we know just based on the application type that they'll be addressed by the BSA and not for us. And that's something that we figure out in that very, first informational interest meeting. People come to us and they say, okay, we think this is a BSA topic. And sometimes it can be, people have criticisms of the BSA, and I can't really comment on that, but sometimes there are just very arcane requirements that are just, perhaps, or like if someone would see that and just say, this is onerous, and that's, that would be a role for the BSA.
Yeah, and I mean, I can agree that there are some zoning laws that are very old that has never been changed that need to do it. And I'll give you the example of, this is the first time I heard of this board. There was a private developer who bought land from a church, and it's zoned for parking in the neighborhood that is notoriously known to not be able to find parking. And so at night, all you see is people park at the pumps, anywhere they can. And that developer applied to the board to waive the parking regs. And the only reason I found out is because there was an architect who had very much been interested in watching these things and he informed the sort of the local neighborhood, and so we got like an education on what I think the most absurd part about it is that the developer can continue to apply for the same thing repeatedly. This developer applied 3 times. And the only reason they were denied is because there was actually community opposition to them waiving that regulation. A lot of it because their only concern was it was going to be too costly to build. For someone who's going to end up doing private housing and make that money back on the absurd rents they would charge, I didn't see that as a reason to waive those regulations. But the problem with that is that they can continue to apply regardless. There is no end to it. So that's why I was wondering if you had a role with the board, because although I agree with the purpose of like they're in between of regulations that the city council and the mayor don't want to change, that don't even play a big role in what it means to build housing now. But when it's zoned for parking in an area that is notoriously known that needs parking, or people fight about parking, it's a little ridiculous that they can continue to apply for the same exemption. And that's nothing to it. That's why I just wanted to know why, like, if DCP played any role in sort of, like, why do they alert you?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I mean, like, why do they alert you in the first place? If like, what do they need from you that you have to be alerted?
Pull up one of mine. Hold on. This is, there was one recently. It's scheduled for a public hearing. Let me just make sure this is on their calendar here. Hold on. So, there's this building that is, yes, it is. So I can drop this in the chat. They want us to know about different, things that are happening in our geography. And so we get a copy of the notice and, just for awareness.
Okay.
Here, I'll send this. So there's, at the end of this, on the last page of the agenda, this is something that, Community Board 9, this has been a big discussion at their meetings. It's a whole long story, but essentially, this building was built, it doesn't comply with the underlying zoning. but it was built. And so, they're going before BSA to like seek a variance. So things like that are very relevant to me because they come up at, at Community Board 9 a lot. But as far as DCP going in and saying, we have an opinion about this, we're going to testify, and that's not in our purview. Like we try to, or our role is to just say this application meets all the requirements, it's complete, and it's ready for public review, unless it's coming like City of Yes from within our agency, in which case, we are advocating, for a project that is originating with us. If it's an outside applicant, we're stewarding it through the application process, without an advocacy role.
And you said that this project, they applied, like they haven't built yet, or they were already built in a zone that they weren't supposed to be building?
That's correct. Yeah.
How's
This
that?
is Community Board 9, Housing, Land Use and Zoning will give you the whole story on this. Yeah.
I mean, I assume that is a failure of DOB and HPD. If you
No
can,
comment.
because you need permits to build. You need permits to build, and those are the only two agencies that give you the permits.
All right, just gonna double check, are there any questions online? And while we check that, I have two questions.
Sure.
I was wondering, what role, if any, does DCP play or might play with the single residency, the SROs, I think, which were approved through City of Yes? My understanding of it is it's kind of like a dorm, where there are shared common spaces and then individual bedrooms. And the reason that I ask is because I understand that they were very popular at one point and then they were banned and now they're going to be back on the table. I have concerns about the conditions in that setting, right? Like, I can't imagine that there are not going to be a lot of conflicts about like who took my food and you guys didn't clean up after yourselves, or having guests in the building overnight. And so I wasn't sure if that's something that, like, I guess will or will not go through ULURP, or if there's a way for community boards to chime in on that. Will there be any kind of notice about buildings that are applying to, take that form or be converted into that? And so, yeah, that's my first question.
Yeah, that is a great question, and that is squarely in HPD's court. But if I do get more information from our department, I will certainly let you know, because this came up a lot during City of Yes conversations, and what is an appropriate dwelling unit size for different areas of the city. So yeah.
So, okay, so then building on that, do you guys play any role in terms of approving conversions or new developments for college dorms? And the reason that I ask that, and again, it may be outside of your purview, but I ask it because one of the reasons that we've got a housing shortage, I think, is because you have 5 students that can double up in rooms and, may not be able to afford a studio, but when you've got several students coming in, they rent a multi-bedroom unit. That's a unit that then is not available to a family that needs multiple bedrooms. And so I didn't know, just kind of like as a threshold matter, if somehow we were able to encourage or pressure universities to build more housing for their students, more dorms, basically, is that something that needs to go through DCP? Because that seems to fall outside of HPD's purview. But I don't know, like, are there special permits that are needed? Is there are there zoning restrictions related to dorms?
So there's that's a great question. There are I'm just gonna pull up the zoning resolution here. But basically dorms are usually, and this is, you're talking about dorms like if if City College built dorms or Columbia, okay. Yeah, so those would be classified as, if it's in a residential, they would be classified as like a community, what's called a community facility use. And it's a community facility with sleeping accommodations. And those are allowed in, they're allowed in all, yeah, actually most districts, but certainly the high density ones that are found in Upper Manhattan. I can give you the zoning, I can share it in the chat, or I can say it to you. But this is, but as far as, I'm not sure, I don't want to misquote and say something that's, maybe there's a rule that I'm not aware of with building or not building, but I think they can be developed as of right in many places in Upper Manhattan.
I see. Okay, thank
But let me
you.
double check because I'm not super familiar with
And
that category of use.
Just to follow up, the city, I guess, I understand it was the mayor's proposal, but I assume your agency had a big role in determining your mission of growth in housing. Do you know what the actual rationale was for the SROs? Like, who wants that besides students, and maybe like you're talking about elderly population who can't find affordable housing because they're on SSI and they're currently doing, there's a lot of these weird programs where you can room up with another elderly person,
Right.
which is like causes chaos because if they don't match in personality.
And you're talking about this. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about the SROs that she's talking about.
Yeah.
Like, who is that for?
This was something that HPD announced. I haven't gotten, word from our department what our role or position, if any, is in that. But that's a great, I saw that news and I was curious too. And it's certainly on a macro level, meant to address, our severe housing shortage that, I think almost everyone experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested, right? Like, I could very much see like a mom who has 3 small kids be like, okay, this is all I can afford. Like, we're all going to move in there, and then having other residents upset, or like, I'm just thinking, are there rules around like children? Are there rules about who can access, who can stay overnight, for how long, who's going to clean them, things like that. And the reason that I connected that question with dorms is, like, I was thinking maybe there's a role for our committee that we can play to try and somehow encourage or pressure universities to say, like, okay, there was this zoning change. Now these buildings can be built as SROs, which are basically like dorms. Like, can we somehow incentivize or pressure universities to take that on, right? So like using that new zoning as a way to encourage universities, can we somehow pressure them to use that to provide housing for their students? And I understand that includes a lot of wishful thinking on the parts of us engaging with the universities, but just trying to think a little bit outside the box. And, or I think of like the hospital, right? Like, they have a lot of doctors that maybe are only here for a couple of months. Like, that would be another great kind of big picture entity that would have, residents who have a common thread. And I think that when there is a common thread, then there's more accountability into cleaning up after yourself. Maybe schedules are more aligned, things like that. So I just wasn't sure which agency, kind of oversees those projects. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a last call for questions because I know that we have kept Audrey here for quite a while. Anything else? Anything else online? No? All right. Audrey, thank you so much. You responded to my email like immediately. You made yourself available, and we're really grateful for your time. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was a true pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I will follow up on some of the points that I noted. And yeah, this is really great. And please feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks
We
so
will
much.
probably invite you in the new year, if not in January, maybe like in February,
I was-
so that we can get an update on some of these questions.
Great. And then I think, I don't know if, I don't remember if we talked about this in the land use committee meeting, but there'll be new training materials. We have to see them. And then maybe there'll be, an opportunity to talk about charter revisions and things like that. So yeah, we'll definitely be in touch.
Great, thank you. And if you guys do any like community educational events, please, you may not,
Yeah.
I get it, but just in case, right? If there are events, I am on land use, but just in case, if there are things that you think might be of interest, whether it's like a information session or you're soliciting feedback from the community, if you can just keep us in mind, I'd be happy to circulate that information to the committee too. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
absolutely. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Enjoy.
Happy
You too.
holidays.
Take care. You
Yeah,
too.
happy holidays, yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. What's really interesting about the SROs is that they could alleviate the, and I forgot who had mentioned it, was you and Deanna or Jay, but the situation in which there are several bedrooms and,
Yeah.
post-college, young adults are moving in and taking up space that could be used by families.
Definitely, and my understanding is that the developers or the owners, the building owners, can get a lot more rent for those apartments because they're charging each person, $800 or whatever, and then there's 4 or 5 of them
Like the
versus with
dorms
a
are just
family.
I don't even think we should allow any more dorms to be built in the city because of what they charge the students. It's a little ridiculous.
So that's interesting though, right? Because that's like an opposing view. Like I would almost say it would be great for them to build more dorms because, and to require maybe their students, right? I know, for example, my university required that we lived on campus the first year, and
Right.
now it's first and second year. So like,
It's a money making machine for them.
yeah, well,
They charge like $5,000 per semester or something, more than that, honestly, depending on the school.
yeah,
And that gets you the shared space and whatever, but like, that's why a lot of folks would rather not live in campus because of how much they're charging. But
yeah,
now and I didn't know this until recently, that this never used to be a thing, but now they're forcing you to stay on campus,
yeah.
which is forcing you to go on in debt because you gotta pay for this and the semester, like, it's a little ridiculous.
I mean, but it's an interesting, like, so for me, I would take the other side, right, of like, there needs to be more student housing and like force your students to live there so that these multi-bedroom units that currently house multiple students can actually go to a family, right? And it would reduce the demand for those units potentially, and so maybe the price would drop. In theory, right? In theory, it's
But
wishful
also for them
thinking,
to
I get
build,
it,
they
but
also
like.
have to take more space.
But I mean, if some of these, for example, if they're converting some of these empty buildings in Midtown that just got rezoned, right? Like, who has money to convert that? Big developers who are gonna charge luxury, build luxury units. But like, I think that some of these universities might have either the capital or the borrowing power to convert some of those empty office buildings in Midtown. And that could be student housing, right? And so, like, the idea to me would be like, if you require students to live in on-campus housing, there's like the SROs are now allowed, the commercial building conversions are now allowed. Like, is there some way that we can encourage universities to like have their students live there in order to free up some of the other apartments? I mean, at the same time, like there's a whole group of like 24 to 27, 28-year-olds who may also line up to live 4 or 5 to an apartment. So it may not address it, but I would like to just explore that a little bit more. I don't know.
No.
I'm just worried, like,
I see landlords, like my landlord, he keeps about 4 or 5 apartments. Like most of my building is rent stabilized. But he keeps like 4 or 5 apartments for the yeshiva, because I'm right by yeshiva, for the yeshiva students. And the way they do it is like you said, 4 or 5 are packed up. You know, I don't know how if it's like divided inside.
Yeah.
They're huge apartments.
Yeah.
But one of the apartments is right above me, and you know, I mean, I like to. They're young.
Right.
This is a pre-war building. Please keep it down. But they like it because you're really gonna make the the killing as opposed to the rec stabilized units. So landlords are gonna have a hard time with that.
Yeah,
Of course, they want the students in there.
definitely.
But yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense to have something.
So now we're gonna get HPD.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna keep pushing with HPD, and then, but if anybody knows of, either nonprofits in the area that deal with, I mean, I don't know, right? It may just be like an interesting thing to come and have both sides come and talk to us about, or even just one side, right? Like to learn more, because we're a district that has a lot of university students, right? And I think that when we have, for example, when Columbia built their campus on 125th Street, there's a lot of community concern about that. Like, has there been any follow-up? Can we find out, like, there's a NYCHA development right across the street, like, have there been issues around that? Has there been any kind of study about the prices of rent around that development? I'm just trying to kind of think out loud about some of the things that our committee could take on. Other things that came to mind were like the Inwood rezoning. Is anybody like going back to do a study on, has that rezoning led to like rent stabilized apartments, like the number of rent stabilized apartments dropping, or has there been an increase in reported bad landlord behavior or anything like that? I think maybe that can be another role that our committee can play. But I think the key is like, other than HPD, who else do we engage? Like what community groups, or, like how do we tap into that? I don't know.
I already asked, coming to the wholesale's office for
About
a
Inwood?
list of like community awards.
Okay,
Just
yeah.
in general.
Mhm.
But most we have that, but we can also ask in detail. Hey, do you have any recommendations for awards related to these issues?
For example, you brought up the Eliza, right? Like, they came and presented, like, maybe we should invite them back for like a follow-up, right? Like, have you rented out all the units? Like,
I know they rented.
can you provide us like a breakdown of the family, or, I'm just trying to think of like, what kind of concrete things can we do about housing? And so,
Where are they located?
Next to the library, the Inwood library.
Oh, in Inwood?
yeah,
Okay.
all right.
That was 100% affordable.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody online have any questions or anything to add to this discussion? If not, I will transition into a couple more announcements. No? All right.
And you only have one?
Speak up if you do. Feel free to just unmute yourself and chime in. So I'll pivot then to announcements. Like I said, we may be able to suggest and, kind of pull together some content that could be posted on social media. It would likely need to go through the CB12 office. And so I will keep us, updated on that. We know that there's some transition happening at the office. The other question that we had was if we could do an email address for our committee, and they said yes. But there's two that they said and one that I said. In order for us to do that, we need to share the account information and the login information with the CB12 staff, right? So that they can, if I leave or whatever, so that they can take over. And the other thing is we just need to be like very, very mindful that it's coming from CB12, right? So like,
Not us.
it's exactly that it's not a personal account, it's coming from CB12, and so that means like, don't go through and delete emails. It means, you know, like decorum and making sure that we're, you know, remembering our place as like being representatives of the board, which we would do with our personal emails no matter what, but like just being like very, very mindful about being professional, about not deleting emails, about making sure that they've got full access. So I will try and work on that. And, you know, let you guys all know, because I think it would be great, like, you know, we started some Google Docs, right? But that could be kind of like the email address tied to the Google Docs, and that's where we can put like our meeting agendas or meeting minutes in addition to what's circulated online. But also like, we could create documents of like potential speakers to invite, or, you know, like with our budget follow-up, you know, questions. So that's the second update. The third update is that the Department of Buildings reached out to our community board, and I think that it was in response to our budget priorities, because some of the language that they used in the email was like what we put about, we want to identify like a specific number or a target goal for, you know, each of the issues. So they just wrote today. I'm gonna write them back, and we had talked about inviting them to our meeting. So I'm gonna basically send the same email that I sent to Audrey at DCP and also HPD to invite them to come and present to us. So if you have questions that are specific to Department of Buildings, like certainly feel free to email them to me and, you know, to like our group thread. And I can start, or maybe I can start a Google document and we can just kind of like add questions. I don't have any concrete questions. I don't think I know enough, but like I invite anyone to.
Inspectors.
About inspectors, okay. Like what they do, how they're allocated.
Like my
Oversight.
building has had a violation. It's a simple one. Like they haven't put the grading. But this is.
They haven't put the what?
The grade, like
Oh.
the efficiency.
Uh-huh.
This is 2017, I believe. What's happening? Like, why would people conform if they're not, you know, are they getting a violation? Are they having to pay constantly? Like, if not, like, what's the point of having these laws if you're not gonna follow up and enforce them?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like my number one.
Okay. Great. So I will keep you guys posted about that. And we had also talked in our November planning meeting about inviting certain nonprofit organizations. And I don't have the notes on hand with me, but I know that in March, we're gonna try and get some of the like legal aid potentially to talk about housing and legal services. We had also talked about inviting an organization that does like substance abuse support and programming. So we'll reach out to all those folks. And then I forget who we had talked about for January, so I need to refresh my memory about that. But whoever it was, I will reach out. Do you have it?
I definitely have.
I have my notes, but they are in a bit stuck. But while you guys look through that, I did want to also flag that with some of these like budget priorities, if we don't get to meet with each of the agencies, then I think like let's just get the ball rolling so that for our next budget cycle, then we have our own kind of number, and maybe we can come up with, you know, like a very high one and then a very like whatever sounds reasonable to us, and then let them come back, you know, like let them say, oh, that's too high. And maybe that would be like a reason for them to engage further. We have a new mayor coming in. There's, you know, changes at city council and leadership. So I just think like as long as we can, if we can like from the very start, be like the loud committee or community board.
Maybe getting in contact with the new borough president and establishing
Yeah.
that relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So finding out like as soon as possible.
Cause I don't know if, I know that Porfirio is like the deputy or whatever. I don't know if he's gonna move with the change or if he's gonna stay at his position.
Yeah.
I don't know what that change is gonna look like, but
Yeah, definitely. And maybe I will ask and see if the council member or somebody from her office can commit to coming in January. Kind of like as a, okay, new year, new council session, reset.
We'll go.
So it was supposed to be January 4th, but it has been rescheduled and will now be on the 15th, I believe. Thank you for raising that. Let me confirm the date.
Yeah, I have it as the 15th.
The 15th, okay, yeah, so our January meeting has been rescheduled. It will be on at 6:30 p.m. on January 15th. And so you will all get the links, to sign up for that. I think that's it in terms of any announcements that I have. I open the floor to old business or new business. Anything? Anybody online have anything to add? Any questions? No?
Good.
No.
Or-
I just want to add, if we are inviting, the council member's office to participate, we should also make sure we're also inviting Abreu's office, since they overlap with our district too.
Mhm. Yeah, so maybe we'll just do like to all of our electeds, right? Maybe we can do that and have them come and do like a January session with us, focus on housing and also human services too. Maybe it could be good to ask them about what they're hearing about SNAP benefits, and changes to that, or, even just getting a sense of like, what are their priorities, right? What issues are they seeing? Maybe the council member may have legislation that she's either introduced or hoping to introduce, and we could help somehow, whether it's shape that or get public input, or even just to know, right? So we can help advocate for that. Okay.
And given that, to my knowledge, they're all returning members, they should have a pretty good idea of what their priorities are.
Mhm.
So I look forward to that conversation.
Definitely. And then also the budget cycle, right? At the local level, we'll start up. I know that, state budget happens earlier, but maybe there are things at the state level that we can kind of identify and make sure that it stays a priority or get updates on. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If there's nothing else, does somebody want to move to adjourn our meeting?
Did we ever technically
Call it to order?
Right.
Good point. All right. We call this meeting to order. Does anybody motion to call this meeting to order? I don't even know.
Sure, I'll
I don't know any of the procedural stuff, so thank you. That'll be on my to-do list to review that during our break. But as a reminder, we've had our December general board meeting date change. I believe it's on the 16th. So we hope to see you guys there. And now that we have called this meeting to order, are there any motions to close the meeting?
And
Any
I'll second
second? Okay, great, thank you. We are ending our meeting at 8:14. Thank you so much for folks online.
This is the earliest.
Bye, have a good night.
Good
Good night, thank you for joining.
Quick meeting since we
Sorry
called it to
for the
order a minute ago.
Yeah,
We can hear
the sound was so,
Hey,
thank
Marshall.
you so much.